He's got a point.
Why?
Hey, Google, what's the definition of vampirism?
Vampirism, the action or practices of a vampire.
Really? You want to elaborate, Google?
Hey, Google, can you elaborate?
Sorry, I'm confused.
Fucking
she's
remember
confused.
She
It was
doesn't,
just 2 seconds ago.
she doesn't even remember what she said last.
Anyways.
I don't know. Yeah, it's interesting.
And of course, I always wonder how far ahead the black world is with this stuff. You know, if these guys are on the verge of regenerating kidneys and stuff like that, and that's where they're focusing their effort.
Aren't they already 3D printing kidneys?
Well, I don't know if they're... I mean, you know, but I mean...
Hey, Google, can you 3D print a kidney?
Here's a summary from the website TED.com.
Oh, no.
Printing a human kidney. Surgeon Anthony Atala demonstrates an early-stage experiment that could someday solve the organ donor problem, a 3D printer that uses living cells to output a transplantable kidney.
Hey, Google, stop.
Printing.
You know, there's a lot of money in the organ game.
My apologies.
Shut
I don't
the
understand.
fuck up. Shut up.
She's not going to... Okay. What about the organ game?
What, are you kidding me? There's a lot of money in the organ game.
Kidney?
Did you know... What, are you kidding me? Well, Canada or China's only got something like 37 registered organ donors. But it's like, fuck, I read something that it was something like 10,000. Extremely conservatively, there's 10,000 organ surgeries in China every year.
Illegal ones?
Yeah.
Like backdoor, like...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, Google, how many organ transplant surgeries are in China every year?
Sorry, I don't know how to help with that.
What a waste of $150.
Yeah, I didn't even approve that purchase. It was supposed to be a fucking gift or some surprise.
A surprise, it sucks.
So anyways, yeah, very interesting chat. So what you're saying is there's a problem in the world because organs are getting to be on the black market. They're expensive, so people are getting knocked out.
Yeah, don't you see those Chinese people downtown all the time?
They wake up without a kidney?
No, in China they just kill you.
No.
It's prisoners. They do it.
No.
They take the prisoners.
They don't kill you. They'll come back later for a different organ. No?
How many times do you think you do that?
I don't know.
I guess if you only took one kidney one time, maybe you could go back for the other
Doesn't the
kidney.
liver grow back a little bit? You could just keep taking
You just take most of it. It's not funny. Haven't you seen the guys downtown? They're there every day.
I don't know what you're talking about.
On the corner of Center Street and 4th Ave downtown. Protesting in Calgary here, protesting.
Protesting what?
The Chinese fucking black market organ
really?
scene. Yeah.
Wow.
It's a big thing.
How much you get for a kidney?
A lot, I think.
A couple $1,000 or?
Probably more than that.
I think it's only like $2,000 or $5,000.
Is it that cheap?
Ask Google.
Hey, Google, what's a kidney worth on the black market?
Here's a summary from the website ksfm.radio.com. The going rate for a kidney in the U.S. is $262,000.
Oh my God! No, on
Here's
the black
more on
market.
What your body is worth.
On the black market,
$262,000
hey, Google, stop.
in the U.S.
Stop.
And don't just pull up a latest website.
Especially from some
do a little bit of
fucking
AI
radio
research
station.
here.
WKRP.
Okay, can you?
No, I'm not asking
properly?
it anything. Doesn't know. I'm saying $50,000 at least.
No. It's like 5 at most.
If you're dead, it's life or
Not
death.
if you're dead. If you're alive.
If your kidney's not working, you're in fucking dialysis 5-6 days a week.
Don't ask.
Hey, Google, what's a black market kidney worth?
On the website ksfm.radio.
Oh my
Google,
God, the
stop.
same one?
Here's more on what your body is worth. Kidney, $262,000 in the U.S., $62,000 in China, $15,000 in India. Pint of blood, $337 in the U.S., just $25 in India.
Here we go. I found a website. How much is your body worth on the black market?
Now, Google, you should have gone to that. The organ trade. I mean, come on.
Kidney, $95,000
Oh, wow. That's quite a bit.
on the black
And
market.
the heart's only 3,300. Geez, heartless over there.
Yeah, no kidding. A lung's $50.
No, lung 60, heart and lung. What does that mean? Is
This
that the
one
connection?
says kidneys only 2,100.
Yeah, 20. Kidney, pancreas, 2,100. Huh.
Bone marrow. Ooh, here we go. Okay, the living can sell hair, $70 for 10 inches. Blood, $340 a pint. Bone marrow, $23,000 per gram. Sell your eggs, 12.4K per IVF cycle in the U.S.
What about sperm?
Surrogate womb, 20 to 30,000 in India, 80 to 150,000 in the U.S.
A surrogate womb.
Kidneys,
And that says you don't even have to take it out.
200 grand. They make up 75% of the global organ trade.
Wow. Maybe I should think.
$10 per square inch of skin. Heart, legal, $1 million. Illegal, 120,000. So yeah, you can get the kidney for 60 grand in China.
Yeah, you're right. I thought it was less than that.
So 50, 60 grand for a kidney. So yeah, man, if you're doing 10,000 of those a year. Hey, Google, what's 10,000 times 50,000?
The answer is 500 million.
That's the kind of question she's good at. So $500 million a
Because
year.
it's faster than you can type it on a calculator.
$500 million a year in kidneys.
Yeah. That was pretty quick.
Yeah. Just adding zeros. I just don't know.
Ask her a harder multiplication one.
Are you kidding me?
You gonna cut out that silence?
Do you want me to try and stump the fucking
No,
computer?
and I didn't say stuff.
Hey,
I
Google,
just want to do a
what's
test on
72 times
speed.
167 divided by 3 plus 72 times 613 minus 3 plus 72?
The answer is 48,213.
It's pretty quick. That's pretty good. That's the only thing she's good for.
Yeah.
Adding shit up.
Yeah.
So forget your Common Core, kiddies. Just go with the Google.
Hey, Google, what's 62,000 times 2?
The answer is 124,000.
Hey, Google, can you live off one kidney?
On the website kidney.org, they say, most people who are born without a kidney lead normal, healthy lives.
Okay, hey, Google,
A
stop.
person may have had one kidney
Google,
removed
stop.
during an operation in order
Hey, Google,
to treat
stop.
an injury or...
Oh, my God.
We could generate quick 100 grand for the show here. We'll just each sell one of our kidneys.
Mine's not doing too good anyway, so.
Okay, we could generate a quick 80 grand. Yeah. Okay.
All right.
It's enough organ
Too
fit.
much of the sports drinks,
Is that what it is?
apparently. Remember, we get into it in this episode.
Yeah, that's right.
Graham going deep. It's a profound UFO quote of the week. Words to ponder and critique. It's a profound UFO quote of the week.
All right, this is from the CIA.gov library reading room. I know Darren doesn't like this, but we're going to try it out anyway. So this is approved for release in August 11th, 2000.
I'm not listening.
That's from Okinawa, Japan. Let's see here. There's a serial number on it. The country, Japan. Subject, the ministry to study psychic powers, UFOs for future industry. Tokyo, Kyoto. In English, 19th of February, 1993. So it says, Japan's bureaucrats are beginning to take the burgeoning New Age industry seriously with a plan to study supernatural phenomena, including psychic powers and even unidentified flying objects. Government officials said on Friday, the Ministry of International Trade and Industry, that's MITI, officials said that the ministry plans to form a research institute for scientific study of art, culture, and parapsychology, such as telepathy and clairvoyance. And this is for the application to next generation industry. So I wonder what they've done since then. And that was like fucking 20 years ago.
Next Gen Industries.
The proposed institute, which will likely be set up in 1995, is the brainchild of a meaty panel established last November to study creation of an industry more sensitive to human needs for art, inner peace, and other intangible things. The official said the panel, comprising key figures from a variety of business and cultural circles, is accumulating data on the effect of cultural activities such as tea ceremonies, flower arranging, and the state of the mind through brainwave checks and other scientific examinations. The scientific approach will also be tried with telepathy, UFOs, and other parapsychological and occult phenomena, long ignored but gaining credibility of late in the scientific community. The research would include brainwave checks on those who claim to experience telepathy or study of such phenomena as soothing music triggering quicker growth of plants. The panel will draft an interim report on its activities by May, providing concrete ideas for the planned institute. The official said discoveries made at the institute are likely to be applied in a variety of ways to industry, especially for audiovisual equipment manufacturing. One example is the possible application as a home-use device which emits supersonic waves to relax people by giving them the illusion that they are sitting in a forest.
I could think of another way you could relax people. Read on the ca.gov website.
There you go, buddy. I don't know why the CIA's got to keep track of that.
Because they're old school.
True that.
True that. They've been tracking that shit for years, since they were like Japanese weather balloon spy plane things.
Yeah.
What else you got? You got anything?
Yeah, I got an email from, I'll do the other email first.
What is it?
It's just, I think it's just now I can't find it here. Having problems with my email. So if people aren't getting responses from me, I'm sorry. I'll try to catch up and keep up.
Yeah, and if James is listening to the show in Mexico,
I still don't have it properly on my laptop. It's gone. It's disappeared. So I'm having troubles again with my emails. I feel like whining about it again. But
help.
We shifted everything over and it was supposed to work.
My email's working great, James. Everything's working perfect.
Really?
Yeah, I really like how the calendar integrates.
Oh.
I think the app could be better. So I think eventually what I'll end up doing is just setting up the Outlook or whatever the fuck it is, whatever we're using now. I might just end up using that on the native fucking mail app again instead of using the Outlook one. I really like the Outlook calendar integration and everything, but it's fucking with my copy paste game. I have to reply a certain way or it won't send, and I get really fucking triggered when it happens.
Yeah, of course.
So,
all right. So this is from Keith. He says, "Hello, gentlemen. My name is Keith, and I've been listening since Thanksgiving 2017. First of all, let me say how much I enjoy the chats. You boys keep." Oh, I don't know if he meant the chats, like the chat room, the perpetual chats, or our chats. I think he means our chats. You boys keep it simple and guide these conversations with an enjoyable variety of individuals. I also appreciate the doses of skepticism you both contribute to the show, tempering the viewpoints of the more extremist guests. As a stoner with independent political views, mild supernatural tendencies, and an active mindfulness practice, the show appeals to me."
That's our fucking demo.
That's awesome. And if you don't want an email to be read, you got to say so, because everything is subject to being read, unless you say so. And if you don't want your name said, then you got to put that in the subject line or somewhere at the beginning of the email.
Yeah.
I've been listening sporadically, bouncing around the titles and guests with the most interesting content. Today, I listened to the chat about the Federal Reserve and banking. I have a suggestion for the family whose daughter has bone cancer. Let's get that girl connected with some Rick Simpson oil. I live in Colorado, and I'm sure we could accommodate the family with healthy living arrangements and medical cannabis. I've encountered multiple people who treated cancer and other serious maladies with cannabis, and I firmly believe in its healing properties. Just a thought. Finally, I'd like to say thank you. Your content is prime, and I usually have a belly laugh per episode. Keep up the goofy Canadian goodness, spreading the light and love and compassion. Best regards, Keith. Darren, thanks for correcting Graham's pronunciation. Graham, it's NASA, not Nassau. And you know what I just thought of there? People giving me a hard time when you mispronounce my name every fucking time you read it. So what about all those mispronunciations?
Nobody cares.
Nobody cares. But
Nobody
NASA
cares.
or fucking
NASA
nuclear. It's just fucking mind blowing.
Yeah.
It's
no one else hears it. It's like you and a couple people have this weird fucking thing where you can hear the difference between Graham and Graham. But most people don't even notice. They don't even know what we're talking about right now. I think it's purely a Canadian thing.
No, it's not Canadian.
No, most of those fucking...
Nobody's...
With all these American accents, you're going to tell me the Graham and Graham?
Hey, most people, I used to work with a bunch of Europeans, Eastern Europeans, they're all Grom. They would say it more Grom. Our Middle Eastern people say it that way as well.
Grom?
Yeah.
So where's the H in that?
I know, I'm not saying you're the only one. I'm just saying...
Grom.
Yeah, I'm just saying, why aren't, people you're always niggling me about my pronunciation of things. So anyways, the Rick Simpson oil, yes.
We had Rick Simpson on.
That was tried. And we had him on. Yeah, Keith might be interested in that episode.
I'm pretty sure that's where Garrett heard about it, was originally from our show.
No way.
Apparently he did a good job making it. I actually bought some.
Should I put it in I'll put that episode in the show notes.
I bought some. You can get the Phoenix Tears locally now for $40 a gram.
Oh, really?
So technically, yeah, and you're I think in the beginning you're taking like you're taking about 1.5 grams a day. So I mean, it's for $60 a day. You could be treating yourself now.
So they did try that?
You'd be fucked up.
They did try that with Garrett?
I ate 0.2. That was fucked up.
Okay, we don't have to talk about that part of it. It's a healing.
Well, I don't know. I don't know how you'd eat a whole fucking 1.5 grams of it. You'd be planning to stay on the couch for like a month.
It's before bed thing. And you do it before bed, then you wake up and you're okay the next day.
No, you're on it all day. You're supposed to be on the couch not moving. All you're supposed to be doing is fucking resting and eating. Remember, that's what he said. So Rick Simpson said. It was like, he's like, for the first fucking month, you're not going to move. But he's like, that's good. You shouldn't be moving.
Huh.
You're resting, you're healing, you're eating, you're sleeping.
And eating greens.
And a lot of pasties, I'd imagine.
Fasting, maybe.
Someone else is telling me today they do intermittent fasting.
Anyways.
New jingle.
Whatever you can afford.
Yep, and that's on Patreon as well. If you subscribe on Patreon, I send you the link because we do have the Patreon option now as well for people who don't like PayPal. Go to Patreon, do there. As soon as you sign up there. The only catch with Patreon is I don't think there's an option for one time. I think whatever you do on Patreon becomes a monthly thing.
Yeah, and you can mail stuff to the P.O. Box as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's on the contact page, grimerica.ca/contact.
Got another donation from Nikki in the P.O. Box. Appreciate that. Nikki the dude. He's like, every quarter we get a card, a nice postcard from him, or a little card.
Couple of greenbacks.
Yeah, that's a great way to, to
buy some coffees when we go to Spokane.
Yeah, we'll save it for our next
American
American Dreaming.
fucking James's way over the border.
Yeah, exactly. So I got an email here from our first Patreon subscriber, since we just finally got that set up. Hey, guys, I'm sending this to both of you because all you Canadian people sound alike, and I can't tell
which is which.
One of you is the one I like. So if you're the one I don't like, feel free to disregard this. Darren, you can disregard this. I found out about you via the Tinfoil Hat guys on one of your crossover shows. I love you guys to death and really appreciate what you do. You make a good case for your value for value program, so I've gone ahead and conquered the historic spot of your very first Patreon subscriber title. I will forever be remembered as that guy in Grimerica history.
That's right. You will be.
Popped our Patreon cherry. I know you are probably...
Makes you wonder who the first PayPal subscriber was now.
Maybe it was my Uncle Dave.
Well, technically, I think your Uncle Dave was one of the very first supporters of the show, but he never subscribed to he would never do that. So he would just send like $60 a year.
Yeah.
But there's still like 5 people that are still on the original Canadian $5 a month. So it's one of those 5 people is the original.
Yeah. I know you're probably still working with the Patreon thing out, but you should definitely add higher subscription rates. I had to force the settings twice to jump over from $1 a month to $5. Anyway, that's all I wanted to say. No real point to this email. I love you guys. You guys are great. You get some real kooks who's rambling, keeps me wonderfully entertained while I clock my 9 to 5 here in Boston. And for that, I will forever be grateful to you, or just pay you $5 a month for being so swell. Stay warm, Kevin. Yeah, thanks, Kevin. Awesome.
Thanks, Kevin.
Yeah, and Darren's looking at the Patreon thing.
I did have another email.
I'll
fix that.
Yeah, he'll fix that.
One way or another. I did have an email that I wanted to read as well, which is actually too bad because now that I think about it, I forgot to do the disclaimer on the...
what? On the email out?
Yeah. Oh, no, on the Black Budget app. Anyway, I got...
Oh, geez. Well, should we talk about our next Black Budget app that's coming out?
The one with Bilo?
Yeah. Do you want to? Or?
In a minute. So I did get an email. I sent out... So I got the classic... the email from PayPal. This is someone had signed up for a subscription. And I sent them the URL. And they immediately replied, "Heyo. I have been listening for a while, and I think I may have been one of those people that accidentally fell into the free end of the Black Budget offerings. You guys rock. Thanks for doing what you do. In the words of my recently passed oystering mentor, keep on shucking."
Nice.
Eric G.
Nice. Thanks, Eric.
Thanks, Eric. And I actually have to reply to him still. Let him know that. That's cool.
He'll probably hear this before. Eric, you'll be hearing this before you.
Well, hopefully I was going to reply to him and let him know that we do have a regular show.
Yeah.
Because he could only be listening to the Black Budget feed.
Yeah.
I'm sure he would have found the regular show by now.
You never know.
You do never know. You can't even get your fucking email working 5 years there.
I know. Not me. People are volunteering to help, so I'm letting them help. It doesn't seem to help. I should just open up a Yahoo address.
GramsCavs@gmail.com.
At yahoo.ca. I'll just do Yahoo.
Why Yahoo?
Yeah, just because it's old school.
It'll
probably work better than this newfangled stuff that's supposed to connect all our devices. And now I don't get them on my laptop and I get them on my phone, and then my phone doesn't go all the way back, so I got to look at both, and then.
Huh. Should be a jingle for that. I think there is a jingle for that, actually.
Graham's rant. Grant.
I don't think it's on here, actually.
We could do a rant segment. I got some rants. We could save up some rants.
Save up some rants. We'll do a segment. I'll get the jingle. I'll get that fucking jingle on here so we could do a proper one.
Bingo, bango, social media jingle. Don't forget to rate, comment, and or subscribe to the Grimerica newsletter. Bingo, bango, social media.
We got a lot of great feedback on the Skies Over Grimerica. So that segment's going well. About to keep doing that. And we'll start with our weekly Bless Up blessing from Mr. Coop himself. It says, "Bless up, boys. Peace symbol." And we've got always a good time with you guys from Rob Lowe. Focus 10. It's Focus 10.
That's right.
Oh, for fuck's sakes, I need to meditate.
Yeah.
On Jingleworthy, which was the car in the ditch. Don't drive baked, eh? Keep up the good works. Grimerica does my head in again. By whatever. That was on the Truth Cat episode. Another one on the Skies Over Grimerica. Another great episode. I love learning about stars and mythology. Another one on Jingleworthy. You have great guests. Keep up the good work. I just became a member after listening for too long without support for the commercial-free interviews. From Sumerian Text. So finally, see, some people go years before their conscience finally gets to them. They're like, I gotta subscribe. I'll tell you right now, if you just subscribe right off the bat, you don't get those feelings. On episode 110, which was actually that'd be years ago.
Wow.
As always, good stuff. On number 241, you should rename your show The Two Morons. Poor Dr. Valet, you're not helping. To which I replied,
We're not helping?
yeah.
Poor Dr. Valet?
From Audrey Rains. She spelled your wrong. She used the wrong your, so I pointed that out for her. And then I said, you should rename yourself to Audrey Paynes. Get it?
I don't get it.
Because her name was Audrey Rain.
Yeah.
I said she should be Audrey Payne.
Oh,
She was
because
really
pain in
mean.
the ass, yeah.
She was really
Yeah.
mean.
Yeah.
Two morons, really?
Yeah. Yeah, it's the
I
YouTube
could see,
trolls.
like-
Why do you
I could
have
see,
to
like,
say anything like that?
Darren and the moron. But the two morons, or Graham and the moron. One of us.
And about valets for the like.
I thought we
out
did
of
pretty
all
good
that.
on Valet. Actually, there's a chance he was talking about you two and just left me right out of it.
Me and Red?
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, why? But why even? I don't get it.
no. That's why I like reading these.
Yeah.
Number 267 from the original Larry. My two favorite Scandinavians. Rock on,
They're
boys.
from Grimerica?
Propagate the formula and support the show.
Nice.
From Buddy Craig Flowers.
Did Pains get back to you? No.
You guys should have a lead Scallon person on again sometime. And Randall Carson, I'm so glad to have run across this guy. Wow, I've learned quite a bit from Randall's scholarship, and many of his hypotheses are parallel with Graham Hancock's work. Wow, that sounds like someone who's just starting to go down the Randall Carlson rabbit hole that's
Yeah.
about to be fucking mind fucked.
Yeah.
Skies over Grimerica. Oh shit, it's Darren and Graham on the YouTubes. I'm a little late to the party, but I am now subscribed and notifications are enabled. I don't know why I'm just now checking out the YouTube feed. 267. This has got to be the most out there episode I've ever heard on your show. I'm not sure if my mind is blowing or my BS detector is going off. Either way, keep up the great work, gents. And on number 266, where Felix played us the little flute ditty, we got Shut Up. I learned Country Gardens on my flutophone in the 3rd grade. But I was going to run over to the Twitter quick. I wanted to make sure we gave a shout out to at Occult Fan over on the East Coast, who helped out a friend of the show with Herb of the show. And made his little trip to Beantown a little funner.
Nice.
So, yeah.
Thanks for the hug.
Thanks for the hug. Yeah. Yeah, so shout out to, that's at Occult Fan on Twitter. If you guys want to follow him, he's cool. Yeah, I think that's about it. I can't really gain anything else from the Twitter. There's nothing. There's way too much. Oh, here's a good joke from Nikki, actually. Did y'all hear about the story of the lady sheriff from Texas? She had a big posse. That's all I got, buddy. You got anything else?
Nope, that's it, buddy.
That's about it.
Yeah.
All right, guys, support the show.
Big thanks to Ira for coming on.
Yeah, big thanks to Ira. Take a chance on some pharmaceutical company here. And, yeah, enjoy the chat. It's a fun one.
Noise you couldn't quite locate or explain. Noise you couldn't quite locate or explain.
Right on. Well, tonight we've got Ira Pastor with us. He's the CEO of Bioquark, and he spent decades in the pharmaceutical industry. And Bioquark is an interesting company looking at cellular repair and regeneration. And it's like a biopharmaceutical. We're going to talk to Ira about all that. And this should be a real interesting show. Thanks for coming on, Ira.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, this is a little bit of a different take for us, different speed. So it's good to kind of approach some subjects like this. Kind of sounds like, reading through all your stuff and all that, it really sounds like you guys are on the leading edge of some interesting, biotech technology. And I don't know, where do you want to start? Do you want to start with a little bit of your background, or do you want to get into Bioquark right off the bat?
I'll definitely give you the background, because even though I spent 30 plus years in sort of was thought of the traditional pharmaceutical industry, I sort of, came in more as a generalist. I'm not a scientist by background. I was actually trained as a pharmacist by undergraduate training that went to business school. Yeah. But the sort of my two interests, that really got me going in this direction. One, that growing up, I was a big lover of science fiction and comic books and everything that the future and of humanity and people could be about, and combine that with the fact that at least down here in the U.S. in pharmacy school, they still gave me a couple semesters of medicinal botany, studying plants and everything that nature creates for us, and all the wonderful medicines and so forth that have come from the natural world. And sort of, at this point in my career, I wanted to go a little bit beyond what I've been doing and sort of merge these two things together, and sort of like how we go back to nature and all sort of the superhuman capabilities of organisms that live here with us, and sort of tap into that as humans.
So is it kind of like a weird cross between almost like a naturopathy and pharmaceuticals?
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of looking at it a different way. And I guess most of the audience would be somewhat familiar with the fact that, even today, sort of 120 some odd years after the modern pharmaceutical industry was started, a majority of everything, I mean, the trillions of dollars that they make every year, not just with drugs, but also consumer products and things of this nature, all had its start from the natural world. This is the plant kingdom primarily, but also, bacteria and fungi and things like that. But the really smart people will tell you that, although we've gone that distance, there's still a lot more out there. And when it comes to, regenerating limbs or turning cancer into normal tissue, or even sort of long-term life extension, which are things that many creatures are capable of, we need to sort of look at it again from a different angle and sort of say, okay, what if we did the first 100 years, we did a good job with plants, and now we have to go a little bit beyond that and say, how can we sort of mimic the knowledge that the salamander and the newt and the zebrafish and the starfish and all this have, and create sort of new opportunities for us as humans to sort of break through this time around.
That makes sense. It's interesting because there is a whole untapped world in there. When you look at, I'm fascinated by the octopus too, how crazy smart it is and how it can camouflage itself in a split second and all that stuff. I mean, but I guess there is such a wide variety of things we can learn from species and biology.
Yeah, I mean, it's we think of ourselves as the top of this food chain, and in certain ways we are. But at the end of the day, when it comes to health, most creatures are more advanced than we are. So it's not. We know about the ability of the salamander to regenerate its spinal cord, but it's fully capable of regenerating limbs, heart. Eyeballs can be sliced out, and even some large segments, if not most of the brain, can be blown apart, only to reform in perfect structure and function. at the other end of the spectrum, you have organisms that don't age, that can live thousands of years. You have some creatures that age in reverse, and then you have a couple that even die technically and are reborn. And we as humans do not have these capabilities. We're very weak when it comes to accomplishing any of this stuff. We're pretty good at laying down scar tissue when we're injured and doing some minor DNA repair, but these really big sort of possibilities are there, and it's just a matter of learning again, or sort of going back to sort of what evolution has done so very well, and copying it, figuring out what happens.
Have you come across anything that might have been like by design or nefarious or something? Like, I mean, because sometimes I think there's these little kind of tricks we fall into about humans have bad teeth, so we have to have fluoride in our water and toothpaste and all this stuff, when, if we probably just quit eating so much fucking sugar and shit, we'd probably be okay. And, all this other stuff we're probably doing that's not okay. Like, do you find any of that in your line of work where it's like you're kind of combating the modern lifestyle? Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, that's, so I'll get questions every now and then on sort of, okay, what, you've been doing this now for a couple of years, sort of give me some actionable advice. And most of the actionable advice still today is basically get a better idea of who we are as humans and start living, eating, and drinking right. Because, if you're drinking 6 Cokes a day and here in Philadelphia eating, 3 cheesesteaks and smoking and doing you're doing something wrong. There's obvious things that, high blood sugar is bad for us. Inflammation is bad for us. And, there's sort of simple things that we could be doing today beyond the obvious, obviously exercise, get a good amount of sleep, stay out of the sun, all that business. But at the end of the day, we mess up a lot. I guess I don't know if that's a function of, we take our 70 to 80 years that we sort of naturally assume we're going to get and want to live at full throttle, but there's a lot of us miss the simple things, and that's a problem. Needless to say, and we've only been around technically a couple 100,000 years, but there's species that have been here much longer than us, and been through ice ages, major extinction events, and all that bit. And are doing just fine, and we're having a hard time dealing with even this couple hundred years. At a
level of comfort unknown to aristocrats, 150 years ago.
Exactly.
So when you guys were studying all these other organisms, like you mentioned, regenerating limbs and these organisms that live, hundreds or thousands of years, what's the how does some of these things die? Like, what's the end? What's the thing that's causing, death at some level of these things? Like, and how far are we from, I guess, even improving on that?
Yeah, I mean, most of so there's this underlying capability across species like this that basically have the ability, for lack of a better word, to sort of turn back time, turn back the genetic clock and start over. That's how limbs are regenerated. It's how some of these species that get cancer and just get rid of it nicely and easily and aren't killed by cancer do it. And it's how, these 500,000 year species also deal with it. I mean, it's all about biological sort of immortality and life extension for them. Obviously, physically, that's a problem.
Environmentally.
Environmental. An asteroid strikes and they're gone. They get stomped and so forth, eaten by a predator. That's sort of what would be called sort of physical immortality. And there's very few. There's a couple things like the tardigrade, which these little water bear species. They're you can throw them out into space and they survive just fine. But most organisms, they like to thrive on the nice little atmosphere that we have here on the surface of the Earth. But for some of them, yeah, I mean, they have sort of mastered the ability to be here a long time biologically, and while of course there'll maybe still be physical limitations, they do things a little better than us on the other front. So that's there's something there to learn.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So how can you explain a little bit about the technical process then, about what you guys are developing?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, so we've been very focused on the dynamic of how time is turned back in our cells. It happens not that frequently in humans. The only place it ever really happens is sort of the moment that all of us are first conceived. So our parents, age whatever they are, 35, 30, what have you, they conceive us, and 9 months later we're born aged 0. We have no sort of the chronic diseases of older age when we're born. There's no babies aren't born with Alzheimer's disease and so forth, and we're not. We come out for the most part pretty normal. A head, 2 arms, 2 legs, and so forth.
Still seem to need an awful lot of shots, though.
Exactly.
I'll just leave that there.
But yeah, the infectious disease thing, we haven't gotten that perfectly yet. But for the most part, we're pretty. That point in time, we're pretty good at turning back things and starting over. A lot of our program has focused on the dynamic that occurs in the egg at that specific time and what's going on. So the proteins, the peptides, the microRNA, and all the other interesting sort of biological stuff that is happening in the egg that the female produces, that takes that DNA and gets it ready to be a 0-year-old embryo and clean it up. And the whole area of, and this is one of the things that, as I've gotten more involved in this space and learned about sort of not just what is going on now, but sort of what we've known historically. And there's just so much fascinating biomedical literature that has happened, 50, 60 years ago. We just forget about it. But, one example actually here in Philadelphia, it happened back in the University of Pennsylvania back in the 70s, was this discovery that you could dump cancer cells into a developing embryo. Not human, of course, but other mammals. And when the baby's born, it doesn't have cancer. It somehow takes those cancer cells and erases their history and turns them into just normal tissue. And this is one of these fascinating things in sort of the history of biomedical research that we just forget about. It gets lost in sort of the scientific archives, but it's there.
Seems like a sketchy thing to do.
Yeah, obviously done with rats and rabbits.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, that's right, yeah.
But, they're mammals, we're mammals. And the fact, there is this ability. There is this nascent ability to, in this sort of embryonic stage, to really get rid of the stuff that's bad.
Is there a stem cell connection?
It's a stem cell connection, but it's a little, it's more than that. It's about the group of stem cells. It's basically about the group of cells knowing somehow what is important and what is not, and what to get out. Because it's not just cancer. These experiments have been done with normal tissue, where you take the embryo and you throw in a piece of intestine, and you don't have a baby or a baby rabbit born at the end of the day with a big piece of intestine hanging out of its head. You have a normal rabbit. So it's very good at sort of organizing in the tissue and cells that it wants and getting rid of what it doesn't. They've even done these experiments with viruses where they try to infect an embryo as it's growing, and you have the baby born virus-free. So there's a lot of exciting things that have been discovered in sort of the field of embryology, which is not a normal area for the sort of the pharmaceutical industry to be involved in, and maybe it's one of the reasons why I never saw much about it. But you sort of dive into this stuff and you realize, wow, here's this whole concept of a regenerative system, whether it's a limb or an embryo, being able to start over, being able to erase the bad stuff, get rid of it, and start the process over again. And this is sort of one of those underlying things. We also see it in regenerative organisms below mammals. So, you have a group of salamanders or whatever that you give cancer to, and then 2 weeks later, they're cancer free. And it's, one of these things where, I like to point out that everything on this planet, from humans to dogs to frogs and snakes and fish and trees, everything gets cancer. All right. Everything on this planet that lives gets cancer at some point. But it's how the lower organisms deal with it, which is so fascinating, and how they just shrug it off and like to turn cancer cells into normal tissue, as opposed to the way we deal with it, which is hammer away with trillions of dollars of chemotherapy and radiation and surgery and still die in millions a year from this disease. So there's a lot to learn. Once again, there's a lot out there that we still have to sort of integrate and sort of reintegrate with what we do today.
Huh. So, oh man. So how did you, I got a bunch of different questions, kind of, pharma related as well, but, as far as the process goes, so you guys are studying the organisms and all that and figuring out how would the whole process work? Like if you found your ideal solution, how would that work?
Well, at the end of the day, from a strict sort of biopharmaceutical development perspective, we're developing biologics that could do these types of regeneration and repair dynamics in humans, sort of administered as a traditional sort of biologic drug. And just for the audience, when I talk about a biologic drug, I'm talking about something that's typically protein-based, more like a human growth hormone or an insulin or a vaccine, as opposed to a synthetic drug, which is whipped up in the lab somewhere. So we're primarily working with biologics, and a second level of what we do, we term combinatorial biologic, which is basically a fancy way of saying we're mixing proteins to have multiple effects. Because when it comes to, if your arm gets chopped off and we want to regrow a new arm, it's not going to be a little white pill in a bottle that you get from your pharmacy. It's going to be a more complicated mixture of substances that are required to initiate a regeneration of something as complex as a limb. So when we talk about combinatorial biologics, we're talking about these types of mixtures. So ultimately, we're developing biologic drugs that can be specifically used and targeted for different tissues, whether it's for diabetes in the pancreas or spinal cord injury or congestive heart failure. And most of what we're doing is more along the traditional biologic development. We're not doing any genetic engineering or complex tissue engineering, nothing of that nature, because one of the more interesting things is people will ask us, well, why don't you do some genetic engineering and engineer some of these capabilities into the human genome? And we say, well, that's not the path. Because what we discovered ultimately wasn't as much our discovery as it was about sort of human genome research, is that when it came down to it, as wonderful as those 25,000 genes are that we discovered in the human genome 20 years ago, most other species are exactly the same as us. I know we're 99.2% chimpanzee, and we're 98% rattlesnake, and 92% pufferfish, and all this.
Yeah, isn't it like over 85% for like everything on the planet?
It's higher. We're so similar. It's freaky. And, you just have to look at the gills and the tails and the webbed feet that we have after we're conceived to understand
the dolphins, the dolphins that used to be wolves.
There's a lot of conservation in the genome. So
I think we still have gills, right? Humans still have gills at some point.
Yeah, we have them in the first couple months.
Yeah.
We do. Yeah.
Wow.
That's just a trick, though. That's just test your faith.
Have you ever heard of this Russian scientist, Dr. Peter Garyev? And he discovered that DNA absorbs light photons in its surrounding area and causes them to spiral through the molecule itself. And that effect will continue in the same spot for like 30 days. He calls it the DNA phantom.
I know Garyev. I know his work. It's interesting. And, we're called Bioquark. And people say, why you name yourself an odd thing like that? and the German people will say, you named yourself after a cheese that we sell here in Germany. But aside from that, we wanted to get something that portrayed the sort of the mix or the merging of biology and physics. So, quarks sound kind of cool because they're a cool subatomic particle. But getting back to Garriev and that type of work, we're all for that. And we think it's fascinating. And it's true when you look at the fact that ultimately, while we're biologic and we're these living entities made of tissue and so forth, at the low level, what are we? We're electricity. We're electromagnetism. We're all this interesting, physical activity. And in between that, cells and DNA are really conduits for moving that information around. That's why you see, aside from work like Garriev, you have, big pharmaceutical companies now. My former employer, GlaxoSmithKline, has created this whole area they call it electroceuticals, right? So they're basically saying, all a drug is in essence doing is taking an electrical signal and moving it from one place to another. It's sort of as a carrier. Well, why don't we just get the drug out of the way and just do it with an electrical signal? So, there is a lot that goes on at the level of DNA, at the level of cell networks and tissue networks that has to do with electromagnetic signaling. It's a fact. And look at the data that recently. The astronauts that were up in the space station. We're learning it's not just the electricity and electromagnetism that swirls around our bodies, but hey, you're up there in the space station for a year. You're getting all sorts of interesting physical signals, whether it's low gravity or the Earth's magnetic field or solar flares from the sun. Our body processes a lot more than just the biologic stuff. It's a conduit for much more information. So all that with regard to phantom information, the whole area of that, telegony, which he researches, the ability, this phenomena that a woman can have a sexual partner, and then after the second sexual partner, they give birth, and the baby looks strangely like the first one.
Oh, yeah, I've heard about that.
Yeah, I've heard about that, yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of weird things that are reported on these, and you can't explain them just with the DNA, because, the DNA is not there at that point, hopefully. But,
hopefully.
So...
Otherwise, you got to start asking some questions.
Yeah, well, the other part of the study that just for our listeners who haven't heard of this guy, it says... he also shined a gentle laser beam through a developing salamander embryo and redirected it into a developing frog embryo. And apparently the frog embryo completely recoded itself with the instructions to build a healthy adult salamander.
Yeah. The it's all so-called epigenetics, the chemicals and the little modifications, and you can easily affect them with electricity and magnetism and light. You want something a little creepier? Go look at not creepy. I like the guy a lot. Go look at Michael Levin's lab at Tufts University. He did a similar thing, and he basically took the tails of these frogs and he created eyeballs that grew in the tails and saw. So you can. There's a lot of not weird, but very interesting ways beyond the biologic. That you can send information and have it impact the genome and yield some type of event. And eyeballs in frog tails was one of the things that they recently did and published one. So, yeah.
Oh, that's kind of creepy, yeah.
It
just, I don't know, it makes me wonder what's happening.
It self-aware?
What's happening underground now, or what's happening, that's not in the commercial world. You guys are tapping into all this stuff, and there's all these other things going on. Do you think that, is somebody taking this type of technology deeper and playing around with it?
I don't think there's a lot going on.
Like synthetic biology, or some of the stories you hear about, that we're farther ahead making fake aliens than you would think, not to get too deep into conspiracies, but, it seems to be kind of right along these lines in a way.
Yeah, my position on all that is that most of the things that they want to do with something like synthetic biology, and for the audience that isn't aware, sort of synthetic biology is sort of the generic use of biologic systems to create unnatural or
Soft
things
matter,
that they don't normally produce. And, while in some ways, some of the things that we do can be thought of as synthetic biology on the light end of the spectrum. On the other end, you have, folks like Craig Venner and what have you creating, chromosomes that do not exist or have never existed, or they want to send a little DNA machine to Mars, and then they send a signal there and they pop out a little the first bacteria on Mars. All that stuff is, I guess, feasible and interesting, but then I point out that at the same time, on this planet we have natural organisms that like to swim around in radioactive waste and live there very happily. We have organisms like I mentioned, the tardigrade, which you could put that thing near a nuclear explosion and it won't die. It'll brush it off.
Those little things that live down by the volcanic vents at the bottom of the ocean,
Exactly.
like the pressures, those things, the heat and the pressure down there should be enough to kill anything and everything.
Exactly.
I wonder if you brought it up to the surface, if it would just expand into a basketball size microorganism.
Probably. We wouldn't get it up
Well,
here.
suffering quite a bit. But
and then you have these bacteria that generate electricity, and the ones that digest plastic. And I say there's quite a few aliens here already that I think personally are much more interesting than anything we could create via shuffling around new genes and creating something from scratch. That's just my opinion.
Yeah,
well, maybe the last civilization was busy.
Who knows? Yeah.
Right before they got hit by a rock, they made all this crazy shit.
Could be. It could be. Left it around for us to find.
So after all these decades in different sectors of the pharmaceutical industry, and now you're the CEO of this company that's really trying to get to the healing and regenerative part of us. Was there a shift at all in your career, or have you seen?
Even in your thinking,
in your thinking, because sort of pharma's getting the rep that it's just like you say in one of your stories, instead of just trying to cover up all the damage that we're doing with cancer and all this other stuff. It's like $1 trillion industry of just putting on Band-Aids kind of, and you have care instead of cure. So was there a shift there at all for you, or were you always sort of more interested in this side of it?
I was always interested in, I sort of think by the comic book mentality and doing something a little outside the box.
Yeah.
But just being there. Look, I have friends that still work there and colleagues that spend, an entire career in big pharma, and they love it, and they are excited by selling the next cholesterol lowering drug or the next, arthritis painkiller and all this bit. And that's fine. And they love doing that, but that wasn't for me. It was boring, and you have to, after a while, you have to realize, as you just pointed out, we spend $1 trillion on drugs alone nowadays around the world. About half of that, $500 billion from the U.S. We spend an additional $200 billion every year on new R&D, and despite all that, we keep dying. We suffer. We keep dying of the same stuff. The prevalence of all chronic degenerative diseases keeps chugging along,
going up.
And most of them are going up. We have this ongoing growth and aging of the population, and so there's an imbalance there. And people always say, "Oh, wow, you're hiding this or that," and I say, "No, it's not as sort of, it's not as difficult as that. It's basically an industry that has been operating for the last 100 years, combined with its regulators and with its sort of investors, it's sort of a group that can only do one thing. They're very good at creating what I call things for output, sort of genomic output, so symptoms. There's basically 7 things: inflammation and immune response and cell death and cell proliferation. These 7 categories that represent $1 trillion. That's all they're good at. And when it comes to disease, basically the things that are upstream. So, the pain from your rheumatoid arthritis that's not your rheumatoid arthritis. That's a symptom. Rheumatoid arthritis is upstream of that. Mm-hmm. It is a much more complicated thing. And people say, well, just create cure. Why can't they just create cures instead? I say, no, it doesn't work that way. It's not like asking, Ford or Mercedes or Toyota to, instead of making an internal combustion engine, to make an electric car. It's like asking them to make a portal, or it's very different. Then they're 2 very different things. And so in my opinion, I think that we're basically going to have 2 industries in the near future. You're going to have one that's totally centered on just creating symptomatic stuff. And then you're going to have one that looks decidedly different, that is going to be creating things that turn back time and erase disease and regenerate. Will there be some crossover? Yeah, because the one thing that Big Pharma is good at is marketing. They got rid of manufacturing back in the 70s and 80s. They got rid of a lot of their sales forces, and a lot of them have gotten rid of R&D. So basically, there are these huge shells of marketing. And, when you have 80, 90, $100 billion in revenue, and you're promising Wall Street 10% top line growth, it's got to come from, it's not going to come from more cholesterol lowering drugs.
More
That's not going to
statins.
do it. Nor statins and all that bit. So there's going to be something different. I mean, so they pushed themselves into a corner where they got to now think, hey, we have to do something different in the coming years, or we're fucked.
In other words, buy Bioquark. So what happens? What happens when that day comes? Yeah. Like, is there pressure from you to, because you're potentially on the leading edge of the second industry of turning back time and regenerating? So I mean, there must be some concern over that from their point of view. You and other companies, no?
Yeah, I mean, my own experience, sort of being on the other side of the table, is the concern will come when we are sort of when the big clinical,
when you start affecting their bottom line, is what's going to happen when people stop getting this or that because you fixed it.
Yeah, I mean, it typically, it will come before that. It'll come when the data from the clinical trials, the sort of the big pivotal studies come in, when all of a sudden you have 5,000 patients that, they're not going to have dialysis because we've regenerated their kidneys to an extent, or they're not needing this transplant drug anymore. And then, you'll get, okay, as an example, the kidney market is $60 billion a year. You pull that rug out, you're taking $60 billion away from transplant drugs and dialysis. That's a problem. Now, so yes, that will be, but today, not as much. I think they have the eye on what's going on. As I say, I'm on both sides of the fence in the sense I do this, but at the same time, I have my friends and my contacts, and I keep abreast on what's going on in the industry. How
long do you think that process takes? Because, I'm trying to think of who I was just listening to an interview with a doctor that's treating, I guess what it breaks down to is hormone deficiency, but what it's being treated as is depression and all these other things, and these soldiers coming back from war. And he's talking about how the science that the hormone replacement they're talking about 91% success rates. Mm-hmm. And he's talking about how the science has been reproducible and in their literature for almost, 20 or 30 years now, but and he doesn't even fault the medical community. He's like, it's not their business to know about this yet. And he figures it's going to take another, 20 years before this hormone replacement therapy that's, stopping people from killing themselves and absolutely changing people's lives. And it's been in the literature for 20 years, and it's going to be another 20 years before we actually maybe see it on any sort of large scale. Do you foresee any of those? Yeah, it's Dr. Mark Gordon. That's who it was. Yeah.
Right. No, I'm familiar with that. No, I think that would be more of a 1990s fear I think nowadays things are changing so much, not just with sort of the dynamic that's in place with what sort of pharma needs a lot sooner than they used to, but the fact that just, half the industry, half the trillion is represented by 8 companies, half of them or so are United States based. But the U.S. is just one country. And what the dynamic is now is, and it used to be a niche, but now you see it becoming a much more of the standard, is while the pharmaceutical industry used to ignore the so-called rest of world and only focus on the U.S. and maybe a couple countries in Western Europe and Japan, you can't ignore that anymore per the smart people. If you just look at what Merck, fifth largest drug company in the world, did a couple months ago with the government of China, they did it quietly, but it's in the news, where they basically said, hey, come to China, and we have a little island set up for Merck. And you can, if any type of cancer you have, you can come try our experimental therapies on this little island. Sort of this concept of medical tourism, which used to be a niche, but now you have fifth largest drug company in the world that's saying, you know what, I'm not going to look at the U.S. for this right now. I'm going to go elsewhere, and I'm going to set up the system elsewhere faster and more effectively. Yeah. And you have this whole dynamic of globalizing both medical training and research. And so you see things like, Harvard Medical School setting up in Dubai, or Weill Cornell Medical Center in Qatar, or even Newcastle University of UK in Malaysia. And you're beginning to say, wow, we have a lot of really smart sort of first world educated folks now that are operating clinical research all over the world. And on top of that, this major sort of, I think the number is like $70 or $80 billion of procedural medical travel now. The research basin is much bigger now. It's not just the handful of these companies in the U.S., it's everywhere. And as I said, the smart people will tell you, we're taking the same path. If you can get something done in 5 years in the U.S., but hey, you can get it done in 3 years in Thailand or Turkey or Panama or any other country that has some very good people now working there, it's going to happen faster and it's going to happen elsewhere. So I think the dynamic is really moving in our favor to get these things quicker and not sort of covered up as they may have once been in the 1980s and the 1990s. That's my opinion.
Oh, that's interesting. So back to the question of the big buyout. So it happens when the data from all the clinical trials starts pouring in and they really realize you're onto something, and then they come knocking on your door. What do you do?
Yeah, we'll see what happens then, and what position they're in. Maybe maybe our stock will be valuable enough that we'll buy one of them to as a marketing arm. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't trying to be. It's just. I guess I'm more interested in the philosophy behind. Like, would you do it if your technology was at a risk of being just shoved underground and not be, like, to me that's always the risk about. Whether it's free energy or new medicine and, cancer cures or whatever, that whenever, right. You hear about all these stories about stuff that gets just bought out and then just stifled. So
right. I think it's less possible nowadays. I'll tell you why. Because most of the powers that be of those 8 companies have done so poorly in many of their sort of so-called therapeutic units, and they use, a company use, whatever, Pfizer, as they may have had 15 different therapeutic units, from pulmonary to endocrinology to cancer, but they've done so poorly, they're cutting them back. So even the giant companies, as large as they are, only have a few segments that they cover. So it's probably unlikely that a big pharma, if we do well in, kidney regeneration, it's much more likely that we'll do a nice deal with somebody that specializes in the kidney, like a Baxter as an example. And then we move our research program onto the spinal cord, and we can do a spinal cord deal a couple of years after that with, a Medtronic. These are just examples. But so basically by a specialty category, so there's not just one giant entity that'll come along. And yeah, I understand what you're saying, but I don't think the companies aren't like that anymore. Fortunately or unfortunately,
Like last like 5-10 years, say, or
yeah, I mean most of them. If you sort of follow the the annual reports and the news, a lot of them are peeling back everything. I mean, they've been so bad at infectious disease research, they got rid of that. They did poorly with oncology, so they're not doing. And a lot of things, the big names, they're just saying, hey, we're going to specialize in these three things.
Right. Core
neurology.
competencies.
Yeah. Even for a large company, it's unfortunately what they have to do. I mean, they're so M&A only got them so far. Research only got them so far. And so these are, the unfortunate, dynamics that you see nowadays. But I think we're going to be in a pretty decent position to negotiate from a position of strength, at least at that point.
That's good.
More than we would in the 1990s, let's say.
And you guys are focusing on kidney as part of a first go kind of thing?
Yeah, we have really three major targets. One, we'll call metabolic, but the kidney is our focus there, and we'll look at that as sort of our regeneration focus. And people say, well, that's not the heart and it's not the brain, but we say, we have two kidneys, but at the end of the day, it's a $60 billion market. It only has two outcomes in terms of transplant or dialysis, and the kidney is made up of many little diseases. So with the kidney, we'd be able to go after a so-called orphan indication, small amount of patients, but nonetheless move it and fast-track it through development as opposed to a more popular or a larger organ. So we're focused on that. We are very interested in oncology, specifically from this angle of not how we kill a tumor anymore, but how we change it and how we turn cancerous tissue into normal tissue, which is a second focus. And then the most important, in our perspective, sort of the really big picture, is the central nervous system. Not just because it is just so unmet today, but everyone will tell you, and everything you read nowadays about the big problems that we're facing, as much as the heart and cancer kill us, this tsunami, they say, of Alzheimer's that is coming in the next 10 years is scary.
Oh, it's going to get even worse.
It's really bad.
Wait till the fucking vaccine schedule catches up.
Yeah.
I predict that, in like 30, 40 years, we're going to be seeing a huge amount of autoimmune disorders. And hopefully you guys are around to start helping people out.
Yeah. That's what we're interested in it. But
are you kind of predicting that same thing, that it's going to keep going in the directions it's going?
Let's just say when it comes to these diseases that there is a major upstream problem. And when I say upstream, I mean that we studied so much of like the output of the disease. We know like there's this plaque in the brain in Alzheimer's, but we know now that there's many things happening upstream that is causing this. It's not just if the plaque doesn't come out of the air. There's things happening beforehand that lead down that path. When it comes to diseases where we have very little understanding of what the primary cause is, especially as you mentioned, autoimmune disease, 60 million autoimmune patients here in the U.S. alone, and we only focus on the output. We have no understanding today. We've a kindergarten-style understanding of the true causes of these diseases. Yes, these are major problems that aren't going to go away overnight. And so our strategy, and we think it's going to have to become the main strategy of everybody, is how you interfere upstream and deal with the underlying causes and biologic processes as opposed to just the symptoms and the output, or else we'll be in the same problem as we are today.
Yeah. So I have a question about the kidneys because I'm wondering, since you guys are focusing on that one thing, I just happen to have to go to the doctor. So I had like ultrasound in the kidneys, and they're doing this. Like one of my doctors says, well, there's some measurements here that could mean that your kidneys aren't functioning, 100% or whatever. So I ended up getting referred to a kidney specialist. I was in there for a long interview with the guy. He was surprised I was in there not being on any pharmaceuticals already. Like that was the first sort of red flag for him. He's like, well, why are you here? And he went through all the questionnaire and all that. And for the most part, pretty healthy. And he couldn't really see why I had a problem with my kidneys, or even if I did, because, and it seemed to be like not very scientific. Like he couldn't really, and he's like, you know, a kidney specialist. Like he was retiring this year, and this is this whole gig. But, and I'm going to try and, I can't really articulate it properly, but there was a couple measurements, and, you know, because they were both at this level, that it seems like my kidneys might not be functioning 100%, and there's no way to get that back. So you have to sort of maintain where you're at right now as a best case scenario. But it didn't seem scientific to me. It really felt like, you know, they couldn't really tell. It was just because these other two numbers were in a certain order. And then it all came down, like, you know, we were talking about lifestyle changes and stuff like that. And I was talking about supplements that I take, and like amino acid drinks, and like sort of like, you know, my protein levels are probably too high. And I've, like, that's the one thing he was like, well, you should probably, you know, cut that out. Maybe come back and see if things change or whatever. So, I mean, you know, the whole discussion ended up being like, I should just stop drinking, you know, workout supplements.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that, especially looking at kidneys?
I have one. Stop drinking workout supplements.
Stop drinking all those workout supplements. I'm sitting here and I'm laughing a bit because I have, you know, the one thing I inherited from my parents was a slightly elevated blood pressure. So I've been on blood pressure meds for the last 10 years, and I see a nephrologist too. And yes, it's the same type of thing. I go in, I get my readings, you're doing fine, and they walk out. Yes, there seems to be a very, I'd say not lack of seriousness, but just a, there is a limit, I guess, to, you know, sort of the state of nephrology or basic nephrology care, and then sort of what happens when one goes over the cliff and goes downhill rapidly with some type of acute damage and disease progression. I mean, when you think that everything that we eat, drink, breathe, ultimately gets filtered through them, the kidneys, there's a million things it could technically be. I mean, your blood, our blood right now at any given point in time has something like 4,000 biotic substances floating around in it, whether it's with foods we eat or the drugs we take or the air we breathe. We don't know. Who knows what's affecting the kidney? But it sounds like in your case, you're drinking too much protein shakes.
Yeah, well,
I don't know how to drink those things anyway.
Look at this thing is like fucking neon blue.
No, it's not a protein. It's
not
not a protein shake. It's just like sometimes and it's not very often. I just have like this, you know, amino acid drink that kind of gives you a little bit of energy and helps cognitively, and it, you know, helps build muscle a little bit. I mean, I'm not. It's not like I'm into it all the time, but. So I guess, but what he's saying about it not being fixable, like it's just going to get worse as I age, basically, is one of the reasons why you're focusing on this thing as well, probably, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, they're critical organs, and no, they while they have minor, let's say, regenerative capability. If you look at the one thing that we do have some recovery from is in the liver, but that's mainly an acute damage. You know, God forbid you're stabbed in the liver tomorrow, it regenerates in a certain way, and it's probably the only major organ that we have that.
I thought the lungs were like pretty insanely capable of repairing the things we throw in there on a daily basis. You know, whether it's the
membrane, so sort of the lining, but not the the deeper tissue. So that's an area where we have some physiological turnover in the lining of the lungs, but sort of like the gut and the skin. But no, the only organ we have that has any sort of proxy that where, you know, if you lose part of it, it will try to grow to a decent size and take over function as the human liver. We have a little bit of that in the kidney, but the kidney is a pretty complex three-dimensional organ that, if it's damaged, it's hard to recover from it just naturally.
Well, if you need a test subject, I'll
keep you in mind.
Keep me in mind. I'll do some research.
We'll ship them down to you. We'll rent them to you. I'll give you a good rate.
Are you guys up to speed on the fasting research about how that seems to be really important in curing cancer and doing all kinds of, regeneration of cells, or at least like recycling your cells?
Yeah, the low calorie or sort of dietary, calorie restriction is definitely sort of the one area that has shown a lot of promise in terms of, as mentioned, not just rejuvenation, but this autophagy, the ability to digest and get rid of junk and sort of less fit cells. The only problem is it's damn hard.
Yeah.
I tried it one day. I almost killed myself. Let's just say it doesn't work for me because I could never do it. But it's definitely one of the things that is reported on at least a decent amount to have some biologic story behind it and makes sense. And when it comes down to things like cancer, yeah, you can starve, and cancer cells starve too. And if you can do that and do it properly, there can definitely be some benefit. I just found it really impossible. And there's people that do it every week, and I don't get it. So yeah, if there's possibilities to mimic some of that,
yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking now.
With small molecule drugs at some point, I think they're testing out some more sort of approved drugs, like a diabetic drug known as metformin, for a similar effect. That's great. It's just I can't fast. I love to eat. I love food.
Yeah, I did. I tried to do 2-day one the other day, and I made it to like 40 hours, and I had a huge headache. It depends on, like, I would have been better doing it 4 months ago when I was a little healthier. I probably could have done it a little better, but yeah, it's just, I think I was having either a coffee,
no eating, or nothing,
a sugar detox, nothing, like water. So I want to try it again because yeah, might be a caffeine headache. I don't know. Yeah. So what can you explain a little bit more about how you guys you would do get some of the data from your clinical studies and what that would look like to make sure that there's no adverse long-term effects, and maybe a little bit more about the kind of like the scientific process of how this would work. I kind of didn't catch all that the first time you answered that.
Yeah, from a drug development perspective, and we have to go through your traditional sort of FDA process, phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. So we would be like any other company, a phase 1 study where we were doing long-term dose escalation, where you basically take healthy humans and you slowly but surely escalate them on doses of the drug over time and study all sorts of biologic parameters, which is moves to phase 2, where you study small populations of individuals with a specific condition, and phase 3 is the larger efficacy studies. But the main purpose of phase 3, and people think of efficacy, but efficacy pretty well in phase 2. Phase 3 is really for long-term safety, because this is one of the big problems that drug companies never see. Even when they do phase 3 studies, a drug can look great after studying it for a year, but then you have 5 years down the road and you have a lot of people getting sick because you just don't see those chronic problems over time. With us, we're in a somewhat unique position in the sense that regeneration, at least in some of these tissues, is not a long-term process. Right. We're not talking about, you're not going to be on something that we produce for 5 years. You might be on something for a month. Right. So our studies are going to be distinctly different. As I said at the beginning, we're not going to be creating a little pill that you take the rest of your life. These are very targeted for specific organ and tissue needs. So, yeah, most of our program will be very conventional along those lines. Now, some of what we're doing as well has to do with drug delivery. So how you get a material into a spinal cord and into a lesion in the spinal cord to get somebody out of a wheelchair is going to be different than how you get it into the heart or the kidney. So there will be differences in drug delivery vehicles and that whole area, the whole science to itself. But our core clinical program, with the exception of skin care, and that's something else, is very traditional. Traditional drug development, no genetic engineering, no unique things that the body's never seen before.
Do you? So here's one before we wrap up here. If everything goes perfectly, where do you guys see yourself in 10 years? Where would you like to be in 10 years?
10 years, I see us having a couple different indications, so approved already, so registered indications, preferably in the human kidney and preferably in the spinal cord injury area. We also are, we have two other things we're doing besides the traditional drug development. We have a consumer product focus as well, because there's just been a lot of interest because, we focus on tissue regeneration and aging. There's a huge skincare market that is very interested in sort of utilizing some of what we're doing on the drug side, but more in the cosmetic and beauty space. So that's something else that will be, preferably, having in 10 years move forward substantially, and that could help support some of the drug work. And then lastly, we are partnering up with hospitals and clinics and other groups outside of the U.S. because, as mentioned, we can't ignore the rest of the world in the current model today. And there's just so much going on, especially the U.S. lost a lot of time a few years ago with all the embryonic stem cell problems and genetic engineering issues, when a lot of things went on hold for a decade, and other countries just leapfrogged us. And so there's a lot of countries out there with advanced research going on, and we're partnering everywhere. So
who do you think is at the head of the curve?
I think there's a lot going on in Asia that is many years ahead of where we are right now. Oh. And not just China. China did, and the China government deal with Merck is pretty interesting. But you have a whole, Thailand Thailand has been sort of building up as a center for stem cell research for a couple of decades now. A long time ago, they saw the light down in Southeast Asia. Turkey is very big in the Middle East. And Panama here in Central America has also sort of liberalized a lot of the work in regenerative medicine. So I think you're going to see some very interesting ex-U.S. pockets of research coming online, centers of sort of excellence in this space that you wouldn't have thought of a couple of years ago.
What did you say happened to the U.S. in the last? Was it about a decade there where things got shut down, or just over-regulation, or what?
Yeah, you had several years there where there was a lot of the big political fighting going on with regard to embryonic stem cell research,
right,
and cloning, which I'm not a fan of, in the not for religious reasons, because I just don't. They're not my technologies, but I understand them, and I think they're But nonetheless, you lost not just sort of this. The time surrounding embryonic research, but you also lost a lot of time with regard to cloning, which I'm not interested in cloning, but the things you can learn from turning back time in cloning research is extremely important. Yeah. And lastly, you had some deaths in early genetic engineering research in the U.S. There's one here in the University of Pennsylvania that basically shut down gene therapy for many years, a lot of the progress. Now you see it coming back, but it didn't slow things down elsewhere.
Especially at the time where technology was developing so fast, probably.
Right. Yeah.
Huh. So I think it's the skincare thing is interesting, because I have a sense, and we've never really looked into this, but women seem to have more of a
Grimerica.com.
a chronic. Like they seem to have more chronic issues, like whether it's like fibromyalgia type stuff or inflammation and all this. And I wonder if the chemicals and all the cosmetics and all the stuff they do compared to us really affects that. And it'd be nice to have some biological or more natural skincare.
You're just digging a deeper hole, buddy.
You don't think there's something to that?
Nope, absolutely not.
I think a lot of that is, interestingly enough, is viral. And that's one area that is ignored. Although they understand the reason why there's such a 3-to-1 ratio of women to men in the autoimmune space is more to do with viral integration in the genome, and that's something that we haven't really looked at for ever. You see little pockets in the virology space talk about it, but no, I think there's going to be a lot more to be learned there, and it's just unfortunately sort of antiviral research has it was hot for a while with HIV, but it just is not. I think there should be a lot more happening there to understand, because hey, we're all. I think the current number is I think all of us are about 9% virus right now, right? All the DNA in our body, 9% of it is not human; it's viral.
Wow.
So there's a lot of us, and on top of that, we have about 100 trillion microbes that live in us. So we're much more than ourselves, and we probably should dive much more into that whole area of research in the coming years.
Wow. There you go.
There you have it. Is there any place our listeners can track you down or follow you or anything like that if they want to learn more or kind of follow you along?
Yeah, I mean,
not
come to the
in a creepy
website.
sort of way, but
no. Hey, look, I'm fairly open. People can contact the company, contact me directly. I love talking about what we do because I'm fairly passionate about it, and as someone that's been around and been on sort of both sides of the table, I want to get the truth and the wisdom and the knowledge out there. So feel free to reach out anytime to the Bioquark website, learn about our programs, learn about what we have going on with our partnerships, ask questions.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I love how open you are about it, and it's great to have you on the show. Do you think is there anything else you want to mention before we let you go?
Yeah, just that although this industry may be considered boring or evil or always promising things that are 30 years away, we are sort of in striking distance with regard to some really major benefits to humanity. And whether it's the 100,000 people that die every day of aging, or whether it's the 50,000 that we lose every day due to trauma, it's well within our intellectual capacity to solve many of the issues that seemed unsolvable just a couple decades ago.
That's great, man. Yeah, it gives us hope, and hopefully it, makes it down to the plebs, and it's not just for the elites in the world. And, there's obviously a big fear about that as well, that we're going to be splitting up into, and a group of humans that are kind of turning into, the singularity and cyborgs and all this, utilizing technology, and then another group that are...
Graham's still down here crushing workout drinks.
One thing I can confidently say about what we're doing, because it's along the lines of traditional biologics, none of this is going to be out of the reach of anybody. Nothing we're doing is $1 million a dose or any of this crazy stuff you read about in the news with genetic engineering and all this other stuff. This is, if people can afford drugs today, they'll be able to afford what we're doing today.
That's awesome.
So don't fear that this is not just for the ultra wealthy.
That's great, man. Thanks. Yeah, keep in touch, and honestly, let me know about your kidney research, and if you need somebody up in Canada, and yeah, we'll keep an eye on your stuff.
I'll reach out.
Right on, buddy. Thanks for coming.
Thanks so much for having me.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
That was a chat with Ira Pastor of Bioquark.
Yeah, that was fun.
That was a good one. It's a good one. Hopefully some of that stuff can pan out for him. Fix your kidneys up for you.
Yep.
Cocaine's a hell of a drug.
Thanks, buddy.
Oh, what are you, 10 years clean?
No, I like how open he was. 10 years coming up in a couple months. Yeah. I like how open he was about,
I'm going to celebrate your 10 years of sobriety by sneaking some mushrooms in your coffee.
Thanks, dude.
Dun, 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 dun.
Graham's got off the rails. Just make sure you record it, eh?
Yeah, the last episode of Grimerica.
That's my only request. If I ever, relapse on psychedelics, I want it recorded.
The last episode of Grimerica. We haven't found him. He's gone. Where in the world Yeah, big thanks to Ira for coming on the show.
Yeah,
Do
no, I
check
liked
out
how
his work.
he was answering all the, the big pharma stuff and all that. And
He did. He did a pretty
very-
good job of tiptoeing around the vaccine one, but that's okay.
That's okay, yeah. Well, because his might be dosed in a vaccine, right? So, I mean, I was thinking IV or something.
Brushed it off. Yeah. That's okay, though. He's a good sport. So big thanks. Check out his stuff, guys. While you're on the interwebs, do head over to grimerica.ca/support and check out all the different monthly plans we have there. I think we got everything from like $1 a month to $30 a month. If you want to do more, you can always do that. Just shoot me an email. I can send you a custom sub of any amount. You can do a one-time donation there as well. And that's how the value for value model works. We'll just keep giving you all these shows for free. And if you find they're giving or adding a little value to your day, then maybe you can add a little value to ours. If you can't afford to do so financially, of course, check out the show notes. Graham's got a honey-do list in there that's got, I think, 5 or 6 or 7 different ways